Good evening. My name is Bob Singleton, Executive Director of the Greater Story Historical Society, and I will be leading us through a tour through the Rockaways, a program that's sponsored by the Historic Districts Council. Advisory, we have this for all of our programs with ourselves in Forgotten New York. Many of the images we have been purchased or are actually owned by other people, and we're given use to use these images. So we must advise you that no individual entity can give, sell, or otherwise distribute our recordings of this digital walking tour presentation. So if you want to use an image or anything that's in this lecture, please get in touch with us and we'll see if you can use the image. Okay, thank you for understanding. Our program tonight will be have four parts to it. First, be sort of an introduction. You know, what are the Rockaways? Where are they? How did they come into being? What's their relationship to the rest of the urban area? We will then define the neighborhoods within the Rockaways. It's amazing when you look at a map, you see a thin strip of land. There are actually, by varying counts, at least a dozen different, very, very different communities that share that small streak of land on a map. And we're going to discuss each one of them and how they're different. We're going to talk about the Rockaways in the early 20th century. We have a series of fabulous images of the community in its heyday. It was known at that time as the Irish Riviera. And then we want to really encourage people to be interested in the topic, to do further research, further discussion. So we'll give you links as to other material that are that's outside there on the website, various projects of interest. So we'd like to get everybody engaged or at least informed. So let's just sit back. This is going to be really an enjoyable little chat here. Now, the Rockaways are part of Queens County. Now, this is a map from about 1900 when Queens County was actually united with Nassau County. So for people out of town or what have you, Queens County later became the area to the left. That's Newtown, Long Island City, Flushing, Jamaica. And there's a little small strip there in the bottom there, which was actually part of Hempstead. Later came out to be a separate county, one of New York's, actually one of New York State's youngest counties, is Hempstead. But well, sorry, let me get back up here. Queens County, as it exists today, is actually a relatively young county, comprised with these the small portion on this map. Now, Queens County is still sort of divided by its community boards. Community 1, 2 is Long Island City, 7, 8, 11 is Flushing, that's number 3. Number 2 is the Elmhurst Newtown area. Number 4 is Jamaica. And number 5, one community board 14, that is the Rockaway Peninsula. That is the topic of this evening's lecture. I was going to put together a map showing the various areas, and I said, you know, I bet somebody has put together something like this. And I just spent a couple of minutes online today, and I came across this really, really fabulous little map here showing the different communities that comprise the Rockaways, the neighborhoods of the far Rockaways. So you can go online and maybe download this copy. It's really, really a very, very nice tribute to the community. Now, when we looked at the Rockaways, as I said, it looks like a strip of sand, if you will, along Jamaica Bay, but actually it's very, very different. I once, back in the 80s, walked the length of the Rockaways from Breezy Point all the way to Nassau County, and I was very, very surprised to find that there are some very distinct communities that comprise the Rockaways. Now, what I did is I put together a map here showing average income for each community, the population, the ethnic racial background, And as you can see, the differences in these neighborhoods, for example, Far Rockaway is 25% white, 45% African-American, 30% others, with an average income of 25,000 and a population of 50,000. Compare it to Breezy Point, which has 98% white, 2% other, an average income of 86,000 and only 4,000 people, and everything in between. So it's a really interesting area, very, very diverse area. Every community has its own unique character. And if you ever have an opportunity to walk from one end to the other, it's really a lot of fun to see New York in so many different facets within a relatively small little area like this. So now we're going to talk about each neighborhood. First, we're going to go from Nassau County in the west to Breezy Point, from Nassau County in the east to Breezy Point in the west. Far Rockaway goes from Beach 32nd Street to Nassau County. It is the easternmost section of the Rockaways. The name Rockaway, there's different ideas about it. Everybody sort of agrees it is a Native American word, but nobody's really sure. I think the received wisdom at this point is a place of sands is the latest idea, but there are a number of ideas out there as to where the name Rockaway came from. And this is a typical picture of Far Rockaways. Bayswater, now we're moving the next one towards the west. This is named after William Trist Bailey. They have Bailey Court there. And it was once a location of a number of summer hotels, such as the Elstone Park and the Sunset Lodge. Bayswater is now a year-round residential neighborhood, diverse population, large number of both African-American and Orthodox Jewish residents. And there's a picture of it along the actually northern part along Jamaica Bay there. Edgemere, it goes from 32nd Street to Beach 56th Street. It contains the Rockaway Community Park. Arverne is to the west, Far Rockaway to the east. Founded in 1892 by Frederick Lancaster, who originally called it New Venice. And there's a very nice aerial view of Edgemere, Queens, looking west. Arverne, Beach 56th Street to Beach 79th Street. It was originally developed by a gentleman named Remington Vernon, whose signature R. Vernum inspired the name of Arverne. New York City's urban renewal projects of the 60s leveled most of the summer resorts and some of the residences, which may have already been abandoned by that time. But the area is coming back. In 2012, Arverne by the Sea is a new housing development, largely developed with some parts still under construction. Arverne, like a lot of the Rockaways, suffered from Hurricane Sandy. And here's a very nice picture of Arverne. Just try to get rid of this here. There we go. Went the wrong way here. Hamels, Beach 84th Street extends to Beach 79th Street, named for a local landowner, Lewis Hamel. Originated as a summer community based on a series of boardwalks around between the bay and ocean shores. In 1897, Hamels merged with Hollands and was incorporated as the village of Rockaway Beach. The following year, it became part of New York City. And it's really interesting, for the next decade, on several occasions, the village of Rockaway Beach tried to secede from New York City and reattach itself back to Hempstead, to Nassau County. And it was stopped by the mayor of New York, or they would have been successful. Its main thoroughfare is Beach Channel Drive. The New York City A train travels throughout the neighborhood on the I&D Rockaway line. Hamel Houses, a public housing project, was built in 1954. It's located within the community. And that's the Hamel Houses. Seaside, Queens, Beach 84th Street, Beach 105th Street, formerly a resort community of small seasonal bungalows, today dominated by middle-income, high-rise Mitchell-Lama apartment buildings along its South Shore beachfront. The main roads through Seaside are Rockaway Beach Boulevard, Rockaway Freeway, and a never-finished Shorefront Parkway. That was a big project by Robert Moses. It's really interesting. The parkway exists in parts of the peninsula, sort of ends where it's this huge highway that slices right through. The original idea was to connect it with Nassau County, but he ran into a lot of opposition and the project was never complete. Seaside contains the New York City subway stations on the I and D line, the A train and the S shuttle trains at Beach 105th and Beach 98th Street. And there's some pricey property in Seaside, Queens. This one section here has a price tag of $3 million in new construction. Rockaway Beach, 79th Street to Beach 108th Street, is the largest urban beach in the United States. This is the heart of the famous Irish Riviera. It's a large Irish American population, came back to the area, lived in the area permanently. It became known as New York's playground. Rockaway's famous amusement park, Rockaway Playland, was built here in 1901. It quickly became a major attraction for people around the region. To this day, I meet people that remembered going to the Playland back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, or spent the summer in this community. And they just have nothing but just wonderful memories of being along the beach in the summers, New York, and their young people with their families. The Rockaways, of course, changed. Now it's become a destination for day trippers. A lot of out-of-towners are starting to call the beach Williamsburg on the Rockaways. It's a place popular surfing. A lot of interesting discussions out there on the blogs about some of the new activities within this particular community. And again, like a lot of the Rockaways, it was devastated by Hurricane Sandy in 2012. And there's a picture. That's a nice picture. It almost looks like something you'd see in California or something. It's a very, very nice, nicely composed picture. Rockaway Park, Beach 108th Street to Beach 126. It's been called also the Irish Riviera. Year 2000 showed that 36% of the population were of Irish ancestry for its zip code of 11694. The St. Patrick's Day Parade in Rockaway is the second largest St. Patrick's Day parade in New York City, second only to the one that's on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. And there is a fire truck. I believe this building may be designated as a landmark. Bell Harbor, Beach 125th and Beach 141. Frederick Lancaster had earlier developed the Edgemere neighborhood, officially gave the community its name. In 1905, Bell Harbor Yacht Club bought property that included 200 square feet of land and 30 plots of upland. It's common for people to live in the houses that their parents lived in, and many families lived in the same houses for generations. This neighborhood is a very closely tight-knit neighborhood. Many of the people have lived here generation after generation, and it suffered some heavy losses from the September 11th terrorist attacks. And this is Church, Bell Harbor. In Ponset, population 2,000, is one of the smallest communities on the peninsula. It's interesting zoning because it's R1 and R2, and it's really rare in New York to have some commercial zoning like that, which prohibits commercial structures and only allows single-family homes. It's a secluded beach location. Some of the homes are priced well above $5 million. Remember back in the 80s, I'd walked from the west through to the east of the Rockaways, with neighborhood after neighborhood after neighborhood, and I was absolutely surprised when I came through this neighborhood because I'd expected to see the beachfront, I expected to see the amusement parks, I knew about the projects, but when I walked through this community, I was just totally surprised. It was just sort of, I rounded a corner and literally I was in the middle of this really wealthy enclave. Rockaways is just an incredible place. It always surprises you. And this gives you a hint of what the area looks like. Very, very nice. Breezy Point, the Breezy Point Cooperative. This is a private gated community, 500 acres. They take care of their maintenance, security, everything's kind of sort of behind the gate, if you will. Residents own their homes, they hold shares of the cooperative. and it consists of about 3,500 homes. Um, they started to build apartment buildings in the late 60s, but the city halted it. Breezy Point is patrolled by its own private security force, um, and features 3 of New York City's 10 remaining volunteer fire departments. We have a picture of one of them coming up right here. Here's the Breezy Point Shopping Center. So it looks like a place out in Long Island somewhere. And Breezy Point itself is divided into further enclaves. One of those, Roxbury, it's just west of Marine Parkway, and joins Fort Tilden. It's an inholding within the borders of Breezy Point. And here's a picture of it. You almost look like something in California. This street's not paved even. It's you never believe that that's New York when you see pictures like this. That's one of the wonderful things about exploring our city, is that as New York never fails to amaze us with neighborhoods great and small. Rockaway Point, just west of Marine Parkway, as another neighborhood like Roxbury. And one of the 3 volunteer fire companies within the area. Broad Channel. Now, of course, Broad Channel is not officially part of the Rockaways, but in discussions of the Rockaways, it's almost always included. It is an island within Jamaica Bay called Ruler's Bar Hassock. Collectively is known as Broad Channel Island. It's inhabited about 3,000 people. It's basically one street. There's a couple of side streets on it. There's docks. Everybody sort of at the end of every street is a dock with boats. It stands in the part of Jamaica Bay called Egg Marsh. It's about 20 blocks long, about 4 blocks wide. And as I said, the Cross Bay Boulevard, 1923, connected it with the rest of Queens and with Broad Channel. Again, it suffered devastation from Hurricane Sandy in 2012. And this is a picture of Broad Channel. Okay, now, as I mentioned before, the Rockaways in early 20th century is known as the Irish Riviera. And fortunately, a series of pictures. We had used these pictures in a book we had written, Forgotten Queens, Jamaica, 1930s. We actually have a lecture around this. But I reserved the section of the Rockaways for this lecture because it gives you a really great insight as to what the Rockaways look like in their heyday, which was the early to mid 20th century. And it was an area that was the same families would come back year in and year out, rent the same bungalows, meet the same friends. It was just a wonderful, wonderful place. Everybody I have met would spend their summers at the Rockaway, just have nothing but wonderful memories of what a great place it was. We have, of course, the elevated train. Back in those days, of course, the train tracks ran along the street, and both had trolleys from Brooklyn, as well as the New York City subway got here, and up until the 50s, a branch of the Long Island Railroad came to the Rockaways. And this gives you an idea of, again, what the areas look like. This was the small little cabins that people would rent. On the left, looked like it was a farmhouse there to the right, the White House. And he basically subdivided his land for these for the summer renters. And again, they were taking all these pictures with the interest of basically leveling everything and completely improving it. Robert Moses really had nothing but bad things to say about this area. He thought it was a honky-tonk environment. He just thought it was just really, really an awful place. And he did a lot of damage to this area in terms of, for example, this area was torn down for a waste treatment plant. Now, not many people like to live next to a waste treatment plant, so the larger area then became sort of a wasteland. To the right, you can see the pier of the elevated train. But again, this really captures the essence of what the Rockaways were like during the summers when, these guys probably didn't see each other since September of the previous year, and they're like, they sort of get together and they have a whole summer of fun and mischief ahead of them. Being a young guy of that age, I know exactly what's going on in their mind with them. It was just a great time, a great place. It's interesting that the houses were built on stilts and they were connected by rockways. What they would do is they would get a group of people would get sort of a small parcel of land and then put a pier on that land and then build the houses on the pier. So it minimized the expense of dry land and maximized their ability to create their own sort of resort. The problem, of course, is that every time you get a severe storm, these buildings would be destroyed and then have to be rebuilt. These buildings that reach 92nd Street were rebuilt in the 1920s. And of course, if they were still there, which they weren't, but if they were there when Hurricane Sandy came through, they would have been just completely devastated. And this is the front of those same buildings. So you can see there's a really tidy place there. The playland was the amusement park for the Rockaways, in the sense of like in Coney Island, there was a lot of different amusement parks, but Playland was the center of the resort in the 30s and 40s. And what they would do is that they would actually rent what they call air rights above these buildings and put their signs saying, "Hey, we're in this direction, folks." So when the people would come off the trains, what have you, they would know exactly where to go. And we have some pictures of actually some of the rides and some of the entertainment in Playland coming up right here. Again, terrible storms in the area. People were aware of where they were living, and they built buildings that could be rebuilt easily. They also built buildings smart. They didn't build them with high profiles. So here we see this is a church, and it's kind of squat looking because of this is probably the best kind of construction you can have in a place that had terrible storms and flooding. Again, a series of really adorable looking bungalows. And these homes were in Beach 95th Street. So well until the 80s, some of the trim would be gone, but you could still walk through the Rockaways and just see block after block after block of bungalows like this that people lived in for the summer. And then they became permanent housing for people, and that just became opened up some opportunities, but also created some other additional problems. Now, one of the interesting things we came across these pictures is looking at these rides and saying, well, okay, who is Maisel? And is there anything about this fellow and about his chairplane ride? We could probably figure out this ride, how it went. So we started going to old newspapers and going through them and seeing what we could find about some of these. And surprisingly, we were successful in some of these things. Some of these rides actually were saved by organizations that were interested in preserving this kind of summer fun. This kind of ambiance of mid 20th century resorts. Others, we have no idea how these games worked, and we'll go through a few of them here. Of course, Kiddie Park, the Midway, was the heart of Rockaway Playland, and speedboats was very, very popular. And we came across a fire that destroyed it in 1938. I think it was later rebuilt. But fire was a continuous problem. Everything was wood, everything was dry, and a lot of times people, a fire would start or something like that, and it'll be in the middle of winter, and there'd be nobody around, and these buildings would burn down. You come the next morning, and or you'd see the fire, and by then it was too late to save the place. So there was a lot of rebuilding going on, a lot of new rides. So there was always a variety of change within this place. This, we sort of sat and scratched our heads on this because this really didn't have any mention as to what it was until a friend of mine who spent her summers in the Rockaways and said, that looks like it's a combination of bingo and skee ball. And we kind of looked at it, thought about it, and it actually makes a little bit sense there. So you can imagine what this was like. How many dozens of people would sit here for hours on end playing at this, putting nickel in after nickel in. Made somebody pretty rich. But this is something. Lupit was the title on the picture, and we have the foggiest notion how this worked. We think they were called cigarette girls, which is the name for the time. Walk around clubs with these little trays in front of them selling cigarettes and gum and things like that. But beyond that, the lupit, the device in their hands, the numbers behind them, um, it's a complete unknown. And it's one of those fun things being a historian is when you always come across things like this, and sometimes you can solve it, and sometimes 10, 15 years later, somebody like yourselves watching this program will say, oh, I remember that, or yes, I know what that is, and I get an email explaining what it is. So it's one of the fun things about a talk like this and this kind of research. Chow mein sandwich. I've never had a chow mein sandwich, but a real New Yorker has, they tell me. People just sort of, when I mention this to older people, they just a big smile and they say, oh, that was really, really fabulous, tasting fabulous. And you can see the price here, 10 cents. So this place was closed up in the winter. And as you can see, there's a guy there, it looks like they're just going to be opening this place up probably like in April 1938. So they're just opening it up for the summer season from having it closed for a few months during winter. And of course, you had commuters. Not only did you have people that had bungalows there, but people would take the trains there. And so you had lockers for them. And this is a picture. There again, you see a little samovar or something in the background there. Macintosh bathing. Now, again, this is a situation where, because today we're used to having public beaches, and public beaches were not really that available at that time because the people that owned the waterfront would sell them or lease them, so that if you wanted to go to the beach, you'd have to go to a place like bathing, like Macintosh's Sea Breeze Baths. And there'd be a lot of variety of entertainment there. They'd have, of course, the lockers and swimsuit suit rentals, steam baths, saltwater pools, athletic equipment, games, restaurants. I mean, the entire family could spend an entire day. It's like going to a resort. And of course, you could go to the saltwater pools. It was a multifaceted, venues of these beaches. And of course, Robert Moses came in, and some storms destroyed them, and basically he turned over the waterfront to the public. So these kind of venues by the 30s and 40s became something of the past. Iron Pier baths. A lot of big pictures. This was a huge place. You can see it was destroyed by storms. Like every decade we destroyed, and then it rebuilt it. And finally, the Moses got the city to create the public, the boardwalk, and now that's part of the Rockaway boardwalk. Shooting galleries, and again, Robert Moses really looked down on this kind of honky-tonk environment. Unsightly, called the Rockaways a slum resort, which was totally unfair. It was a family place, people of modest means. For many of the families, when they just first came to this country, this was their, this place like this, Coney Island, was their opportunity to get away from the grime and work, the tedium of work, and spend some time with their family and have just a grand time. It was just totally unfair to slander them and this place with an expression like slum resort. But Robert Moses got his way. And you can see what he started to do. He just started to, 1930s, just start to bulldoze everything. And this was the big expressway that he wanted to put in between New York and the waterfront. Actually, he wanted this to go from Staten Island to, out to Nassau County. And he never finished it. There's just a section of it that's still on there. So this was really the first death knell for the old Rockaways. As I said, Rockaways exist through the 40s, 50s, and 60s and 70s until, finally people with flights could, to get into a plane and go down to the Caribbean. So, or go to California. So that really was the death knell. Everything changes. But there's as I said, one of the communities, there's a hipster element has shown up, and it looks like they're going to be trying to reinvent the Rockaways. So Rockaways is a place that's always moving, always being reinvented, always something new around the corner. And I ended this section here with the beginning of the end, an automobile showroom in the Rockaways. So this is, everybody thought, oh, this is really great. We've got cars. Now we can go out to, Nassau County to the beaches and what have you, which is okay, but it killed this place. Now, for some of you that's interested in additional research, and this is a really fascinating topic, there's a lot of rich material here. I've put together a roster of internet postings where you can find more information and discussions about the Rockaways that could add additional information, also images. So let's take a look at this first. The first place I went to was the New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission reports. And there are 23 entries for Rockaway. Now remember, Rockaway Boulevard is not the Rockaway Peninsula. I mean, the Rockaways is used in different parts of the city besides the peninsula. But some of those entries do relate to the peninsula. On the Rockaway Peninsula itself, there are 3 designated landmarks: the Richard Cornell Graveyard from colonial times, a firehouse company, ladder 264, 134, 101st Precinct Police Station. So there's information about that. And as I said, there's information here about areas that are under consideration for potential landmarks. The Rockaways is also a place that's always in motion. It started out as a sand spit, and as you can see, from 1860s to 2000, how it's changed its shape over time. Now there are programs today to try to stabilize the waterfront, so it's not going to be moving around as much as it did in the past. But this really drives home the point that what you're dealing with here is basically a mound of sand that is within the Atlantic Ocean. Now there have been some efforts to preserve the bungalows. Richard George, who many of us in the preservation community have known for a number of years, has started something called the Beachside Bungalow Preservation Project. And there's a number of pictures of the insides and the outside of the bungalows. He has focused the web page that's in there is about 15 years old, but I did see some recent work on him that he has an interest in particular 1 or 2 blocks that have remained pretty pristine from earlier times. So he's still very much interested in saving the area, and he is his family had land property in the Rockaways for several generations, and he grew up there, and he just loves the area, and he deserves every piece of support that he can get. The New York Preservation Archive Project actually did a study of the area, and you can see a picture there. That's a fabulous picture of the previous days, I guess what 1930s, 1940s of the Rockaway, the bungalows. So this is an active project. I would consider this to be an active project, but he does need some support, and hopefully some political support so that he can designate some of this part of our past that could disappear. But for those of you that are armchair explorers, there are lots of postings, and I have a nice listing here for you on this. We'll be recording, so you can go back to this lecture and take a look at some of the links. Our associate, Kevin Walsh of Forgotten New York, who is associated with the Historical, he's walked around New York since the 1990s. This guy has a fabulous collection of contemporary images. His website is really the standard for community, tours. And what he's done is gone to the Rockaways on a number of occasions. He's done complete tours of the Rockaways. He did one in, I think, like 2008, and he did another one a couple of years ago. So there are two complete tours from east to west. And then he's gone into areas of interest. Rockaway Beach, remember that well used to be in Central Park? That got destroyed by Hurricane Sandy. But, you know, the issue of the abandoned courthouse, which is hopefully an adaptive reuse can be found for it. You know, make that into a landmark. And he talks about, you know, the various streets of the Rockaway, or Tilden, for example. The Bayswater has some interesting history to it. And he has also worked with Sergei Kandinsky. Sergei has a fabulous book on the various streams and watercourses of New York, and has written some information on the Rockaway area. So there's a couple of other tours here from Forgotten New York. And just put this in a line, and these stories will come up. And here's the listing of the Forgotten New York links and lectures, and I'm sure it's not complete. And other blogs, there's the Far Rockaway blog. Untapped Cities did an article, but everything's kind of centered on what Kevin Walsh has done. So that's a good start. They also have some fabulous blogs where they cover all the various neighborhoods in New York City and discuss, you know, the traffic that went to the neighborhoods and the neighborhoods themselves. And since this was a resort where people would go to for the season or go there for a day trip, there was lots of rail traffic to the Rockaway. So these are some good links with some good pictures. And for digital images, if I may say, the Historical Society Smug Mug has over 1,000 images of the Rockaways. So you can just go in there, it's free, and just, you know, kind of just look at look at the pictures and get some sort of sense of what life was like back in the day in the Rockaways. And this is one of the pictures. It looked like it was just a fabulous place. You can imagine people in early 20th century coming out of their tenements in Yorkville and taking a train with the family, the picnic basket, and coming to spend a day in a place like this. It must have been great. And that's it, folks. That's our website, and that is Forgotten New York's website. And the floor is open for questions, if I can help you. Thank you.
If anyone has any questions, you can put it in the chat, or if you'd like, you can unmute yourself. I'm also going to include a link to our Six to Celebrate brochure in the chat.
Okay. All righty. Oh, there's two chats. Moses' role in destroying, there is a lot of literature about Robert Moses. The Power Broker was one that really goes into some really fine detail, and it's a well-written book by Robert Caro. There's been some people lately saying that Moses wasn't quite the bad person he was, and you know, I mean, when you take a look at what Moses did, yes, he did fabulous stuff, but there was the built-in bias that he had towards the people that went to a place like the Rockaways, and I think that he could have come up with some ideas to perhaps improve the area without destroying it. But as I said, the Power Broker is a very good book. There's a lot of literature out there too about other places by Robert Moses. Plenty of literature there. What is the oldest remaining house in the Rockaways? That's a good question. And I'll tell you why it's a good question, because the research in historic preservation in Queens is very much incomplete. And even like an historian home area, I'm continuously finding buildings that sort of sat there in plain view, and I'm looking at a map from Civil War, and that building's there. So Queens is, in a sense, in its infancy, and There are plenty of buildings from the 1800s that still exist in the Rockaways. And at some point in the future, we will start to organize ourselves to do an actual census of buildings. But these lectures like this, I mean, I hope that we can continue a steady stream of these things, because this is a very, very important part of maintaining interest in these things. And then going forward, giving you these links. Now you can go in, you can do additional research and put together your own lecture. There's a lot of material out there. A very tiny portion of what's out there. Any questions from anybody else? Oh, there certainly was organized opposition, but in those days, he was the man, and he had controlled he controlled the money, and he also had a number of city agencies that were not completely under the control of government, like agencies are today, because a lot of stuff he did, nobody else did before him. So he knew what he was doing. He put things together, which gave him a tremendous amount of power. But people learned from that, and things changed. I don't think there'll ever be another Robert Moses. He did fabulous stuff, but I don't think there'll be another Robert Moses again, because there's a lot of bad he did. Anyone else? One new message. Okay.
Did you answer, is there still an amusement park?
I didn't see that one. Yeah, I think there is. Yes, there definitely is amusement activity. As I said, you have those hipsters have their small little enclave that they're trying to work on. I haven't been down to Rockaways for a number of years, but when I walked through there in the 90s, there was still some things down there, and I'm sure there's still some amusement parks that's in some way, shape, or form still down there. It's like Coney Island; it continuously reinvents itself. That's a good question, though. I'm going to look into that. Anybody else?
I don't see any more.
Okay.
So thank you very much. This was great. Thank you everyone for joining us. We, as always, very much appreciate it. I think, as you can see, this was recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel as well as all of our other virtual tours and meetings. You can check that all out at our YouTube channel. And also we are doing in-person tours again. So I also just included a link in the chat to our events page. We have one coming up this weekend and then one coming up at the end of the month. And that'll probably be it for the season. And then we'll do virtual tours throughout the winter. So please keep an eye on your emails and on our website. And we hope to see you either in person or virtually very soon. Thank you very much. And
thank you.
Have a good night.